Murry Swartz. I was born in Philadelphia in 1937 in the dark ages, you know, right after the Depression and just before the Second World War. And I was raised in Philadelphia, and I was the baby of 4. I had 3 older sisters, and I, of course, was Prince Charming. So what can I tell you? In those days, childhood memories, they were neighborhoods. So I lived in a neighborhood where you walked out of your house and that was your only playground. And all the kids at different ages all lived on the same street. And it was a neighborhood. It was things that you read about or see in movies, but that's the way it was. People sat on the front porches, listened to the baseball games. You know, you could walk down the street and listen to the whole game because people were playing it on the radios on the front porches or the front steps. And it was just nice, you know. We would do things in that neighborhood. We would go crabbing down in Delaware and come home, and my daddy would set up a big table outside, and all the neighbors would come and eat steamed hot crabs and drink beer, and you know, on a tablecloth made of newspapers. And it was just wonderful times. And if you came out on the street and they were playing ball in the middle of the street, stickball or baseball or something, everybody got put on a team. And as older guys came along, you were asked to just be a substitute on the sidelines, and you know, you had to wait your turn to get back in again. But I loved growing up. It was just fun. My dad worked. He was born in 1900, and he went to work as an apprentice because he left school at 5th grade, and he worked as an apprentice in the electrical construction business, and he worked his way up to be an electrical engineer, and a brilliant one at that. And he was so important with things that he did that he was, again, 42 when the war broke out in the United States. So he didn't have to go in the military because they needed him to do whatever he did at the naval base out of Philadelphia and things like that. And but I remember that's what he did, and he was given an honorary degree from Drexel University in electrical engineering, and that's how far advanced he went. This uneducated man who read a lot and learned a lot. This is how he advanced in the world. It was really, I wasn't aware of how important he was. He was just dad, that's all, you know. But they had a big problem in the World's Fair in New York in those days, and they called him from Philadelphia to come to New York to take care of this problem, and he solved it for them. And, you know, I was very proud. I don't know what the hell it all meant, but I was very proud that he was asked to do that. So, and he was quite a guy. Quite a guy. Loved fishing, you know, and he loved playing pinochle with his buddies, and that was him. So my mom's family, my mother and her sisters are all born in this country. They came from Lithuania, and you know, my father, Litvak, whew, you know, he used to make fun of where she came from. Why, I never understood, but he made fun of her being from Romania. I guess he felt superior. I don't know. Growing up, my mother's mother, Rose, Grandma Rose, and she passed when I was 9, but, and she spoke with an accent, you know, she's from the old country, you know, and then instead of Murray, she called me by my Hebrew name, you know, Mashallah, Mashallah. Yeah, Grandma, Mashallah. Would you turn the radio for me, put on the Tin Man?
Presenting radio's most popular mystery comedy, The Adventures of the Thin Man, starring Claudia Morgan and David Gothard.
There was a program, The Thin Man. She loved that program. And she said, the Tin Man. I said, it's thin, Grandma. No, I said that, tin. Okay. So she was a sickly woman, but she was sweet. But she baked cookies for me almost every day. So I would come home from school. My house smelled like a bakery. My mother was an excellent cook and helped Ellen. Ellen became one of the greatest cooks you'd ever want to meet. Ellen was good at everything, but that's a whole other story. But Grandma, I used to come home from school, and smell those cookies. You know, the breakfast table would be a plate full of cookies, and I'd get a quart of milk, and I would drink a quart of milk and eat all those cookies. That was my afternoon routine. Grandma Rose.
Life could be a dream. Life could be a dream.
My mom used to say, "Where you going?" "I'm going out and look for a fight." You know, I liked fighting. I don't know if it was because I felt more manly. You know, I had this little baby face thing, you know, whatever. And I wouldn't fight. I would take up for the underdog or whatever, or I would just fight. And I was very apt to have a bloody nose. I could sit in class to get out of class and bang myself in the nose and have a bloody nose and have to go to the nurse's office or something just to get out of class. But I used to come home with blood all over me. It must have been a fight today. Yeah, I beat the hell out of them too. You know, I used to like to fight. So my parents in South Philadelphia, they had a lot of boxing clubs. Philadelphia was known as a boxing city for years, and for good reason. I mean, the great fighters came out of Philadelphia. So my parents said, "You like to fight? We'll send you to boxing school." So they sent me, and I was there for a couple of weeks, and they were training me in my first fight. So now they do it according to weight. Well, I was chubby kid or whatever it is, and they had this real tall, thin kid I had to fight. Well, he would jab at me, you know, with this long arms of his, and I couldn't. I was getting frustrated, kept hitting. So that finally, I forgot about I was at boxing school. I was just charging them. I knocked him on the ground. I started to beat him like I was fighting him out in the street, and they threw me out of the boxing school. There was 4 of us, and I was the baby of 4, 3 older sisters, and me. And you know, I was, of course, Prince Charming. You know, I was allowed to do things. My sisters used to call me Sugar Lips. Well, how come Sugar Lips could do that? We weren't allowed to do that. And I said, that's because I go to Mama and give her a kiss on the cheek, and I could get anything I wanted. But I wasn't given, you know, a treatment. I mean, I had chores to do in that house. I wasn't gonna go out. I couldn't play ball on Saturday with my friends till I scrubbed the bathroom floors and things like that. And the only thing I did in the kitchen after dinner was I used to take the trash and garbage out, and my older sisters would do the dishes, you know. And then there's a happy house though, but they used to sing songs, and I used to learn all the old songs, you know, from back in the 40s. So yeah, I had a very happy childhood.
You load 16 tons. What do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt.
At 10 years old, I had 2 newspaper routes to support my gambling habit. I loved, you know, the guys came home from the Second World War, the veterans, where they used to hang out on the corners at the drugstore. They shoot crap against the wall. They would give me 50 cents to stand and look for a police car, tell me when they were coming so they could stop the game, you know.
Little darling,
We moved from West Philly to an upscale neighborhood of Winfield, and I went to Overbrook High School. And it was very traumatic for me leaving my neighborhood and all my neighborhood friends to an upscale middle-class neighborhood. I didn't like the kids there. They dressed too fancy for me. You know, those days they used to wear white buck shoes and everything, and that wasn't me. I used to go to West Philly every day after school so I could hang out with my buddies. I wasn't happy about, but I went to high school and graduated in 1955. And in my class in high school was Wilt Chamberlain, the basketball player. And my first day at Overbrook, I was walking down the hall, and Wilt Chamberlain was walking around the corner of the hall, and he was 7'1" or 7'2", and I never saw anybody, white or black, ever that height in my life. I said, oh my God, look at that. But that was quite an experience, and we became good friends, you know. Obviously, he was the tallest in the class, and I was the class character because I used to act out a lot. I got in trouble all the time. I was really, I was a delinquent to us. See, I had learning disabilities, and they didn't know about it back then, and I didn't learn to read till much later in life, and I went to private tutoring there, nothing. They didn't understand it then, so Yeah, I was a pretty wild kid. I wasn't wild at home, but as soon as I walked out the front door, you know, I mean, I ran away from home for 5 days, took some buddies with me, just hitchhiked and ended up almost in North Carolina. Yeah, that was another experience. I did crazy things. I didn't think they were crazy then. I just thought I was entitled to do whatever I wanted to do. I was 16, ran away from home for 5 days, you know. They got back, they sent me to the school counselor. The school counselor said I was socially, emotionally disturbed. Maybe I was, but I don't know. I liked it though. I was funny as hell. I got into Temple University and I struggled, but I liked it. It was fun. College was fun. It was a place to drink beer and have fun and pledge for a fraternity, and you know, and that lasted about 1.5 years till they threw me out. So I said, oh my God, I got thrown out of college. You know, what am I going to do now? Well, they had the draft then in the United States. So every man, after you were 18 years old, you had to register for the draft, and you had to go in the military in some, you know, in some branch of the military. So after a while, they had a program where you could sign up to go in the military, not get drafted, but you could go to active duty for only 6 months. So you had to be in the reserve, and I figured, well, I'll do that and get my military service over with, and I did that, and I joined the Army. That was in '57 I signed up. I got out of active duty in September of '58, yeah, my drill sergeant, he said I was the worst soldier that ever came into this United States Army, and you know, he used to call me Hebrew, which if you did today in today's world, you would get thrown out of the military for being prejudiced. But he was a funny guy. He was a funny guy from West Virginia. And inside, I used to make him chuckle all the time. So I enjoyed the military. It was a place, it was like going to camp to me. It was fun, you know. I was stationed in Fort Knox, Kentucky for basic training. And after that, they sent me to Fort Bliss, Texas, in El Paso, Texas, and for the remainder of my service, you know, I don't even know what I was trained as, in communications or something like that, I don't know. But but that was fun too. That was next to Juarez, Mexico. So when we had time off, we went to Juarez on the weekends and saw bullfights and got drunk for real cheap. Didn't cost very much to get drunk there. And but that was my military, and then I was in the reserves after that. But I used to get away with murder in that too. So I was proud to say I was in the military for 7 years, and the highest rank I got was the lowest rank you could be was Private E.T., and I was Private E.2 Swartz. Yep, that was me. When I came home, you know, I took a job just to take a job, and all my friends were still, you know, maybe in college or doing things like that. But I had one friend that used to go to Penn, and he was a very talented guy, and he wanted to be a comedian. And he left college, and he started hanging out in the clubs, and he met all these older guys who I eventually became very good friends with. And one of the older guys that we used to hang out with was in the management business, and he represented black singers. At that time, he had the biggest, strongest stable there was in black music, and he said to me, you know, you would be really good in our business. He said, I could use somebody to work with me. I got, you know, so much, I'm so active. So all I wanted to know, how much money you gonna pay me? So I left my other job. You know, he told me how much money he would pay me, and you know, he used to manage acts like the Drifters, you know.
Down by the sea, yeah, on a blanket with my baby, that's where I'll be.
They were a real big singing group at that time, you know, especially through the South and the Carolinas. I mean, they loved the Drifters, Jerry Butler, who used to sing, For Your Precious Love, and the Impressions, Amen, Amen, the Impressions, and Gene Chandler, the Duke of Earl, and Major Lance, and Monkey Time, and all acts like that. And they were the strongest acts until Motown kind of came in the scene, in the late '60s. And but these acts were really big, important acts. So I went to work for him, and I used to go on a road on a lot with them and travel with all the black bands and black musicians. And I travel mostly in the South. And I wanted to get down, though. I wanted to be the brothers to like me and know I was for real. And so, I would stay in black rooming houses with them rather than stay in the motels that white people were allowed to stay in and things like that. We used to go to town, and we would cross the tracks into the old, in the black neighborhoods, and most of our meals were in soul restaurants. And I love to eat soul food till this day. It's probably put me in the bad health that I had all my life, but I love soul food. I love it to death. And I did that for some years, and eventually I really got stronger in the business. And I signed my first act, which was actually a white act out of Memphis called the Gentrys.
I keep on dancing for Daddy's gonna twerk the jerk right now. Shake it, baby. Come on and show me how you work.
And the Gentrys had the #1 hit in the country called Keep On Dancing. And I sang, and all they wanted to do is to play. They wanted to play the Apollo Theater in New York. And I said, them boys, that's easier, because they had a hit record on pop music, on R&B stations and whatever it is. And I put them in the Apollo Theater. They thought it was the greatest thing in the world that these Memphis boys could ever had. The leader of that group was Larry Raspberry, and he became a prolific writer in music way back in the 60s and 70s. But and I was very active in the civil rights movement. I traveled with all black artists, and I lived in that world. And Aretha was so popular, when she broke out, she was and Dr. King's office used to work with her constantly. They always wanted her to show up around the country with him, and to get people to come turn out and so forth. And so I worked with a lot of young reverends in their office. In Philadelphia, there was a guy by the name of Judge Higginbotham. He was very active in civil rights, and he used to represent a lot of people. And there was a disc jockey in Philadelphia by the name of Georgie Woods, who was the popular R&B disc jockey, and he was very active. And I used to work with them, and so I was very, very active in civil rights. And I saw some atrocious things happen in my travels, in terms of mistreatment and so forth. And back in those days, in the late 50s, early 60s. And no, I have compassion for a lot of, I always like the underdog. I always try to help the underdog. Yeah, I remember that well. There were some crazy days. And we eventually, in the management business, a lot of the booking agencies like the William Morrises and so forth, they kept black acts in the what they was called the Chitlin Circus, and there were black venues and little dance halls and things like that. But our acts were so popular, we decided we kept threatening the agencies, like Shaw Artist at that time was the big black music agency, and we kept threatening them. We were going to leave them if they didn't start advancing our artists, and they didn't take us seriously. And one day, the guy I went to work for, Irv Nahan, he told me he had a relationship with this woman in New York that used to be Dinah Washington's manager.
What a difference a day made.
And Dinah Washington and used to have a booking agency with her. They used to take jazz trios, and Dinah used to take them on the road play with her and so forth. But she had a booking agency license, and he told her the type of agency we thought that should be available to all performing artists, and we gave her a piece of stock and a percentage of profits in the earlier 60s, maybe 62, 63. And we started, and we took our stable of acts and put it in the agency. And then the contacts we had all over the, country and all, they kept saying, well, you want to take our act and put it in your agency? And this, well, we grew our agency, and the acts started leaving all the other agencies they were in, and we became the biggest black booking agency in the world, really. I mean, we represented, Aretha Franklin, Ray Charles.
Hey, mama, don't you treat me wrong. Come and love you, daddy, all night long, all right now.
Eventually Sammy Davis Jr., but Gladys Knight and the Pips, Kool and the Gang, the Isley Brothers, Richard Pryor, I brought in the early 70s, he was starving to death at the time, and he had his first real album of any consequence, and his manager had gotten my name he was a William Morris guy originally, and said, geez, I heard you really know the industry well. And we had some meetings. I flew to California. I met Richard, and he didn't have 2 cents to his name. I said, well, I'll tell you, let me put some change in your pockets, and I'm just going to put you on 3 dates on a weekend in a concert, which you don't believe, you shouldn't perform in large concert hall, but forget that, put some money in your pocket. So I'll get you $5,000 a night for 3 nights to play, and you'll do the middle part. Kool and the Gang opened the show, then Richard Pryor, then Gladys Knight and the Pips, and it was a big 3-day sold-out concert, and he earned like $15,000. He didn't have diddly dork in his pocket. He was so thrilled about that, and then that gave me some time to start his career in the path that I thought he should follow, and he really believed in me, and his manager, Ron de Blasio, believed in me, and he went ahead and became, as everyone knew, the greatest comedian, at the time. He was brilliant. He was just a brilliant guy. Sad like most comedians, destructive and so forth, but he and I had an unbelievable relationship. And eventually, Sammy wouldn't leave me alone. I used to have to go on the road with him, and I had responsibilities with the other acts that I represented. So I used to go out on the road with Sammy, hang out with him all night long till 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and then he would go on to sleep, and I would sleep for an hour or so, but I had to get up and do my agency work. He used to wear me out, but he was a great guy, and he loved Ellen, my wife at the time.
The night we met, I knew I needed you so.
I had met her a couple times. Somebody I knew had been dating her, and it was a Labor Day weekend, and I had been partying in Philadelphia all weekend. I was worn out. My brother-in-law had a plane, and he said, come on, let's fly to Atlantic City and hang out on the beach for Labor Day. I said, I can't move. He talked me into it, so we went down there, and she was on the beach at an older friend of my brother-in-law's had a cabana, and a lot of people hung out there, a cabana on the beach, and there was this little 18, 19-year-old girl in a bikini, and teased hair and lip gloss and all that, whatever they wore. That was the early 60s. And I said, oh, how are you going home from the shore? And I said, you get your bags packed and we'll pick you up at 5 o'clock by cab, and you'll come out to the airport. So she packed her bags, and we flew to Philadelphia. And I said, I got a show tonight closing at the Uptown Theater. The Uptown Theater in Philadelphia was like the Apollo Theater in New York, in Harlem, all black shows, and it was in North Philly. So she said, well, I'd love to go. I said, well, then we landed, you know. I was in my early 20s. I had this big Eldorado convertible, you know, at the airport. She was with her parents, and I drove her home. I said, now you got 1 hour. You got to be changed because I got to go to the theater. So, all right, I went home and changed, and I picked her up, and I drove her to the Uptown Theater. And the comedian on the show was Flip Wilson. I don't know if you know, Flip Wilson was a very popular comedian, black comedian. He had his own TV show, but this is before that. And I introduced her to Flip, and then he had to go on stage, and she was wearing these real tight powder blue pants and a red cutoff, you know, her chest out, and really proud of herself, you know. And Flip went on stage, and he said, he's talking to the audience and telling us jokes and whatever, and you know, and you got to remember, there's about 4,000 black people in the audience, you know. He said, you know, I like colored people. I was raised by colored people, and they were like, oh, ho, 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 they're laughing, and he's doing all these racial things. He said, oh, by the way, I'd like you to meet my fiance. And he walked over to the wings, and he took Ellen by her hand, and she was all suntan from the weekend and everything, and walked around and said, well, they didn't know whether to laugh or be respectful to her or whatever. And she was built beautifully, you know, and he brought her back off stage, and why don't you tell me I was going to go on stage? I would have worn a garment. I said, you're not being auditioned for the Ed Sullivan show. I didn't know he was going to do that, you know. But that was our first date.
I got a woman way over town that's good to me.
People used to go to Ellen all the time and say, how do you live with that man? How do you live with that man? You know, because of, you know, my mouth and my sarcasm and my whatever.
Did she bring out the tender side of you?
There is no tender side to me, except for my grandchildren. No, I'm very tender and very caring for other people. I'm very conscious of not wanting to hurt anyone. I spent my life as a young man defending anybody that could bully or got picked on or whoever it is. You know, so we were married close to 57 years and went together for a couple of years, so it seemed like a lifetime. But everybody loved, Richard loved her. He used to love to come to the house, and he used to look at it and say, this is a kitchen. This is what a kitchen looks like. Pots and pans hanging from the ceiling, and, you know, we had butcher block counters, and it was real earthy, you know. And he said, and she used to, when she went to California with me once in a while, he would make her come and make her apple pies for him and dinner for him. He just loved her cooking. So that was a beautiful relationship. And Ellen was an integral part of my growth. She just was such a cool lady. But I sold out of the agency. I just couldn't take it. There was an element of New York that came in. You've heard about those people, you know, and they were trying to take over. And I said, I'm not going to be busy making my living for them. And so I sold out, and I sold out for much less than I should have gotten. But I stayed. I went back to Philadelphia. Well, I always lived outside of Philadelphia. I commuted to New York, and I decided to go in the management business. And Richard Pryor stayed with me, not as his manager, but as his agent. And so I continued, you know, representing Richard. We would, you know, I could always pick up money. Richard wasn't working that much, but I still did some tours for him, or the HBO filming tour and things like that I would do for him. And we just, I'm probably one of the only people that he ever kept in his stable of, he fought with everybody, lawyers, managers, or whatever, not with me. He and I just had a brotherhood. We just, he trusted me, you know, if he came off stage, and once he cooled off and everything, and, you know, how was everything tonight? You could do better, Richard. You know, you missed here, there. He loved hearing honest answers. He just loved people didn't stroke him, but he was brilliant. I mean, I praised him when it was due, and not a a way of soothing him, but a way of being honest with him. So it was a lovely relationship. Richard was a special person to me. He was just, I don't know how to explain it. I respected him so, and he was the kind of person you wanted to help. He just was sad. He was a sad person in a lot of ways, but he was brilliant. During that time, I ended up in the 80s. I managed Patti LaBelle, in which she went solo from LaBelle, Billy Paul.
Mrs. Jones, Mrs. Jones, Mrs. Jones, Mrs. Jones.
You know, me and Mrs. Jones, we got a thing going on. Grover Washington Jr.
Just the two of us, we can make it if we try.
Which was the biggest jazz saxophone player in the recording business. Well, once I got him out of Motown and put him with Electra Asylum, Grover had the biggest recording contract ever for any jazz artist there was. And so Grover Washington, Ramsey Lewis, I managed Ramsey for a while. I don't know, it was just, but I got terrible problem with my back. And I had Patti LaBelle, I had put on a tour with the Commodores. It was her first 6-month national tour, and she did one half of the show, and then the Commodores, who were the headliners, went with her. And I went out on my first date on the tour with her, as I did with most artists, but I was in such terrible pain, I had to leave the tour. And as it turns out, when I came back to Philadelphia, they kept me in bed for 10 days, and then I had to do surgeries, and I had problems following surgeries. And, well, long story short, I ended up being in bed for almost a year, and I dropped out of the music business. I just couldn't do anything. I was, in bad shape at that time. But I eventually, got on my feet, and as I started to get on, I said to my wife, you know what? I'm having the best time of my life being at home with my 3 sons. I never had that experience. I was running all over the world all the time, and I had 3 sons that I'd never spent day in and day out with. And I said, you know what? I'm going to retire. She said, you're going to retire? I said, I'm telling you. She said, well, can we afford to? I said, I can't afford not to take advantage of this. First time in my life, I'm going to stay with these boys until they go to school. 3 children, they're all different. You could have 10 children, they're all different. They're all, all 3 of my boys are different, but there is a common fiber in all of them, and that is character. And it makes me proud, as proud as anything. I don't care how successful they are in business, be able to look at people in the eye. And I could always make a living. I don't know, I'll find a way to do it. That's when I was doing HBO tour for Richard. I could do stuff like that from home, but I couldn't physically, do as much. And as I said to my wife, I stayed home until the mid-90s. And I was not only running out of money, but my youngest son was getting ready to graduate the University of Maryland. I used to go to college campus and drink with the boys and drink beer and have more fun. I took my kids on sailing trips, and we had great times. And I said, it's time for me to find a way to make a living now. And I knew I wasn't going to stay in the music industry. And my wife wanted to leave Philadelphia because of the cold weather, and she couldn't stand it. She used to get depressed in the wintertime. So we started looking for an area to live. She wanted to go to in New Mexico. Richard Pryor was out there. We spent a week with him when he was doing a movie, and she fell in love with the craftspeople, the art, the Indian pueblos, and I said, no, I can't live in the mountains in the desert. I got to live someplace, else. So we looked at Florida. That was too cookie cutter for me or her. I didn't like to be with normal straight people anyhow. I felt uncomfortable. So we saw a movie one night called Rich in Love.
You better think about
And Ellen was an artist, and she said, "Oh my God," she said, "would you look at the Spanish moss and the trees and the wetlands, and where is this place?" We looked at the credits, and it said Charleston, South Carolina. I said, "You never seen Charleston, have you?" She said, "No." I said, "Would you like to see Charleston?" She said, "Yeah, I really would like to see Charleston." So I said, "All right, we'll go see my sister Norma, lived in Augusta, Georgia." We drove there and visited with her. My nephew lived there. And then we swung over to Charleston. It wasn't that far away, 3-hour drive or so. And we took a walk. Yeah, we stayed at this nice hotel downtown Charleston. And we took a walk for about a block and a half. And she said, "I love it here. I love the people look you in the eye and they say, 'Good morning,' and 'How are you?' And it's friendly. And I just got the right kind of vibes." I said, "You like it? Turn around, go back to the hotel." So she came back to the hotel with me. I said, "Let me call my realtor." I called my realtor. I said, "Susie, I'm in Charleston, South Carolina. We're coming home in 5 days, maybe 4 days. I'm putting my house on the market." She said, "You're kidding me." I said, "No, we're moving to Charleston." I don't know what I was going to do. So sure enough, that was in 1994. Came back to the suburban area, mainline area of Philadelphia, and put the house on the market. And Robert graduated Maryland, and Jimmy was in chiropractic college at that time in Connecticut. David was out; he graduated college already. He was out working. And I said, "Boys," I said, "Mom and I are moving to Charleston, South Carolina." They said, "You're moving?" I'm very impulsive, and I'm a gambler, which I was a bad gambler as a younger child. So I said, "Yeah." They said, "Well, how come you're moving?" Well, I said, it's just like a farmer. If he planted his seeds in his farm for years and wore the ground out and just didn't know what to take out of the ground, he said, "I have to move on and get a fresh piece of land and plant my seeds elsewhere and start my life again." And they said, "For real?" I said, "For real." And we came home, we sold the house, we made a couple trips down to the Charleston area, drove around, talked to people. We knew somebody that my wife went to school with from elementary school on that had lived here. And we decided we would move. Sold the house. We rented a condo here. Came to Charleston, and that was in 1995, towards the end of 95. And we moved here, and this friend that Ellen knew from school had business plans for a restaurant and whatever, and I decided a restaurant. I like cigars, so we could have a cigar lounge and private cigar lockers. You could keep your cigars nice and fresh in the humidors and have special drinks served to you. And anyhow, we went ahead, and I was in business in construction, building this place 6 weeks after I had got to Charleston. And it had to be crazy to do a thing like that. It took a lot of money. The name of the restaurant was Kiva Han. Kiva Han means in Turkish, coffee shop. And we had a great big bar and a big brass coffee makers, whatever, and a barista that made all nice coffees. But we had Mediterranean food, and it was a very, very, for Charleston, they never saw a place like this with arches. And I brought music into this place, and we played music 7 days a week, live music. Sundays we would only have a acoustic guitar player to play out on the patio and walk through the place. People love Sunday brunch in Charleston. And anyhow, we had this restaurant. I would have jazz some night, R&B, I would have pop music. It was very unique. And people would stand in line to get to this restaurant. There was one problem. I didn't know the restaurant business. And while we were building this restaurant, I would go and get blueprints from the architect that I needed for the construction company. And every time I went to get blueprints, like 10 drawings, I need 3 sets or 4 sets, they would say, well, we can get these back to you in a couple days, day after tomorrow. Of course, the ISO blueprint machines, I said, what are you talking about? I need them right away. And this happened a couple times to me. And I found out from these people I was involved with, there was a thing called digital printing. And I didn't know anything about the printing business, but I found this young man that had been in production with blueprints and so forth, and I flew him up to Charlotte, and they had these digital pieces. This international company called OSE, they had this digital equipment, and he reported on what it was. He said it was phenomenal. He said, I can't believe it. You would take these architectural drawings, engineering drawings, and you put it through the machine, you'd scan it, it would memorize it, it would print 3 to 5 seconds. You would have a whole, drawing by drawing by drawing, no smell, no blue, no smell from it, and turnaround time was minutes, and I said, I'm going to go into that business too. And I hired that young man, and I was crazy. I just very impulsive, but I did research on it, and I opened a small little place, printing place, A&E Printing on Meeting Street, little tiny place, and we got one of these digital pieces of equipment, which were expensive. They were $175,000, and we got a color machine and a black and white machine, and he knew how to operate all that stuff. In those days, the business was based on architects and engineers, and the construction business. That's really what it was. This large format digital equipment was for architects and engineers. People say, what's A&E for? And I used to say, for A-hole and Ellen.
Up in the morning,
I made Ellen the major stockholder of the business, so it was a woman-owned business, which gave us a lot of perks. Ellen was incredible. I'm telling you, she really was incredible. Women loved her, men loved her. She just was capable of doing so many creative things that she was. I told her she was a great cook. She wasn't a great, she was a great cook, and she got a lot of it from my mother, but she just wanted to learn about things, and she got better and better and better at it, at everything she did. In art, she was painting and drawing since she was a young girl. She went to art school as a little girl, and she was really, she was in the juried shows in Brooklyn Art Museum and whatever. She was good, but she, when she became active in Charleston in business, she was good in business. People just appreciated her for all the things she could do. She was a giving person. She had time for everyone, but she was a hard worker. Well, that Arthur Ravenel Bridge, you may have crossed downtown Charleston with her, but that was the first big job, and we got it mainly because she went after that job, and as a women-owned business, you get 10% leeway on your bid, and whatever the bids we put together, we got that, and we had that for a number of years, and that was a big job for us, a big, we never dealt with anything of size before, but that took years to complete, and we were, but she was charming. And she was the head and then she got in the horticultural society in Charleston and got to a high position there because she loved the garden and the earth, and she loved to plant things. And we lived up north, and we had big vegetable gardens outside. Not many people live that way, but we did. It was dinner time. She would give Jimmy a basket to go out. I need green beans, I need pole greens, I need you to get zucchini, give me some zucchini, I need bell peppers, I need it. And he'd come in with a whole basket full, and Ellen would make, and she would make things and freeze them for the winter, all ratatouille and things like that, all these vegetable things. she was just an incredible person. She started a women's business organization and became the head of it down here, and really did a lot and organized a lot with women in business, and it spun off into a lot of bigger things that she couldn't keep up with. She couldn't be in business and do all those things, and and be the grandmother that she was. I mean, they loved Gammy Whammy. That's what they called her. They loved Gammy. Jimmy's daughter. That's all she wanted to do was to be with Gammy. And from she would be when Gammy would take a shower, she would sit and use her makeup and make up her makeup. And then she would get out and teach her how to draw. And then she would get this one and teach him how to, Ellen never stopped from morning until night. She never took naps. She never knew what it was. She used to work outside in the hot summer here in South Carolina with her garden and planting things. And it's 8 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock. She just kept a pitcher of water, and she would sweat and be dirty and whatever it is. She just was something else. So she was blessed to have me. I used to tell her that every day. An angel in disguise. You married an angel in disguise. The place we leased was right in the heart of downtown, and it was 900 square feet, and it was a little tiny place, and we put this massive piece of equipment and scan equipment in. We bought one color, we got one color machine and one black and white machine, and that's all and a binding machine, of course, but that's all we had. And this one person who knew how to operate everything, I don't know, I'm not good with technology, and we had him, and we hired one other guy as an assistant and a driver. And I bought us a truck, a delivery truck, and I went around and I called people and told them who we were. They said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're very loyal to the people that we've been dealing with in the blueprint business for years." And I said, "There's nothing I respect more than loyalty, and I want you to keep dealing with them. But if you get stuck and you need something quickly and you need turnaround time, I can turn around drawings for you in minutes." Chris, what are you talking about, boy? I said, "I'm telling you, just give us a shot, and I'll do your first little job for free." "Well, you will?" "Well, yeah. I mean, what the hell's the difference? I was paying for the equipment anyhow." So all of a sudden, I'd get a call from the guy and say, "I got 6, 7 drawings I got to need right away for a meeting." That's no problem. I would go to the office personally. I'd pick them up. I would bring them back. We would do them. And in 20 minutes, so I'd turn around and walk back in the man's office and give them and they used to scratch the back of the head. What the hell? They thought it was like magic. They never saw anything like, because they had to wait in line for the old Diazo blueprint machines. And I said, "Here," and you notice it doesn't smell the way blueprints smell, and you can see everything in perfect detail. And they said, "This is amazing." "Well, glad I could help you," and I would leave. And sure enough, a week or two later, they'd call me, "I think I've got something else I'd like you to do. That's up to you," And, I'm a street guy, so I used to talk like, they weren't used to this, Yankee coming in talking the way they talk to me. I said, "Come here, you dummy, give me that stuff. I told you it would work. You call me a dummy? Yeah, I'll call you a dummy because I told you about it, but you didn't want to." So before I knew it, we kept getting more and more accounts. And, Ellen was working in there as best she could. She was doing stuff for the restaurant too. She was designing the outdoor plantings and palmetto trees and whatever the hell. So what I was doing was I was going to work in the morning, working all day in this printing place. I'd go back, I'd shower and change. I'd get Ellen, we'd go downtown, and 7 days a week I'd work at the restaurant. And I'm telling you, there was nothing but people. We did so much business, but I didn't know that business at all. They were robbing me. So I went out to the trash can one night to empty stuff. There was like 6 steaks packed in newspapers, and they were robbing me deaf, dumb, and blind. But I didn't know that business. We were in such debt. The guy that was operating the place wasn't paying wage taxes. I didn't know. I mean, I only had so many hours a day. The bartenders were stealing from me. You know, in those days they used mini bottles, little mini bottles. They didn't have great big bottles when they poured a drink. Well, they used to buy mini bottles at the store, and people would order the scotch or bourbon they liked or whatever it is, and they'd open a little mini, but they were taking them out of their pocket and taking the cash and putting it in there. All I can tell you is I lost a lot of money, but because of the restaurant, I met a lot of people in Charleston, and a lot of people, and I told them what else I did in business, and we just kept plugging along. But we eventually had to take. I mean, I lost 400,000 or so, or more in the restaurant. We sold out, and but I was operating in the printing place, and that kept growing and growing and growing, and we were doing our work. And Ellen, you know, used to call on people. She was a great salesperson, and she understood technology, and she was an artist, and she understood design and color and things like that, which I didn't know anything about. All I knew how to do is to play with people. I just knew how to get along with them, just like I got along with the artists I represented, you know. And, it just kept growing and growing. And finally, one of our clients was building a place on Upper King Street, and I knew that little 900 square foot wouldn't, you know, we had to get a second big piece of equipment. The floors couldn't even handle the weight of it. So I rented a much bigger space on King Street. We opened up on King Street in the 400 block, and we rented there, and we operated, and it kept growing and growing, and things were happening. But when I was at the little place on Meeting Street, some people came along and said to my help, you know what, we're going to build a bigger place for you, and you'll operate the equipment and everything it is. And one morning I got a call at home, and they said, Murry, your place is dark. And who is it? And it was the serviceman coming to service the equipment. It was before 8 in the morning. I said, I'll be right down. I came down, and without telling me, these people had hired all of my help. I didn't have that much help, but hired my help and left me with no employees. And Ellen got showered and came downtown, and I called my clients and told them what had happened to me. They said, we'll go along with you as best we can. And well, with the exception of a few clients, most everybody stayed with us, because we said, we don't act like that down south. That's not how we do people. We don't do anything under the table like that. And even though these other people didn't open for 6 or 8 more months, they paid salaries to these employees they took away from me, because they thought that would bring me to our knees. But Ellen and we had our biggest job at that time had just come in, and Ellen and I worked and finished that job at 2-something in the morning to have it ready the next day for these people. I called the people in Charlotte, my salesperson. I said, told them the story of what happened. I said, I want you here down tomorrow. I don't even know how to operate this equipment properly. I need help till I can find some help. They sent them down to me, and I started making some calls to people, and they recommended a guy that had background in the reprographics business. I said, give me his number. I hired him over the telephone. I don't know what he could do, but I know I needed help. And I hired him over the telephone, and it was actually another guy in the printing business gave me his number. And I brought him in the day after, and then he knew somebody that could do a little bit. I said, hire him too, and he'll drive and he'll do other things. Well, I never looked back. We just kept producing. My salesman stayed with me a few days to help out with the problems. We did as best we could, Ellen and I, and remember, I was working 7 nights a week at the restaurant. I used to be the host, so people that came in wanted to see the owner. I had partners, but they wanted to see the owner or whatever. And and I had, it was crazy. It was absolute crazy. I know. Remember, I didn't move to Charleston. I was 57 years old, 57 years old, I was starting life all over again. I mean, I'm 87 years old now, so, you know, I didn't, if you took the energy I have now, I never could have done it, but some way I did it. When these people left me, my sons were the first to know about it. My youngest son, Robert, was working for a corporate computer group handling corporate accounts. And he said, Dad, I'll give notice. I'll come down. I said, no, 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 no. No, I'm coming. I'm going to help you. I'm telling you. And he gave them 1 week's notice, not 2 weeks' notice. And before I knew it, he flew down, or he drove down in his car, and he lived at our house with Ellen and me. And he came in and he understood technology to start with. So even though he didn't know that industry, he made whatever adjustments he had to make. And so he really was operational. I wasn't operational, you know, I was Mr. Charming, that's all, you know. And so Robert came, and Jimmy was still in chiropractic college. He came down after graduation, which was maybe 6 or 8 months later. He graduated, and he went to work in the chiropractic profession and said to me, this is what I borrowed money to go to school for. I borrowed money to help people get healed and everything. I'm making money for lawyers. All they're doing is sending phony accident cases to me to work, and I knew there was nothing wrong. But you know, he said, I am so disappointed that I spent all that money for college. And I said, well, Jimmy, we are growing faster than I know. And I don't know if you'll consider, but we'll find a place for you, because he's a workhorse anyhow. You know, I said, we'll find a place for you in the business, you know, it's growing. He said, can you really handle it? I said, we'll handle it, you know. And he and Robert at that time moved out. They took an apartment and eventually built a house together and lived at the house. And the business kept growing and growing and growing. They saw things happen. I had other things happen to me physically. Some years ago, I had a stroke, and that really, I had a couple strokes, in fact, you know, but only 2 of them, you know. There's 3 strokes, you're out of the old ball game, so I still got another stroke to go. So, but they have built a business that I never could have built without them, because I didn't understand the direction things were going in, technology. All that stuff was foreign to me, you know. But, you know, I still go into the place every day, though, just to get out of the house, because I live alone. I don't have Ellen with me anymore. She passed 3.5 years ago. So, but I go and I have lunch with the boys every day, unless I have doctor appointments, which is my new social life now. I socialize with doctors. Yeah, they're just wonderful. And yeah, that's good. You'll come back in next week or 3 weeks or whatever. I said, why don't I just send you checks? It just, you know, it's a hell of a deal you got, you doctors. So, meantime, that's what it is. I live alone, but I go into A&E, and it is just so great to see this place operate on a philosophy that I'll take credit for in the beginning. When I opened that business originally, my manner of dealing with people is very informal and service. I'm used to service. The entertainment industry, in the management business or the agency business, all you do is service. You give people service. There are other places open, you know, in Charleston, brought in digital equipment, but no one had the informality that we had at A&E. No one dealt with clients the way we dealt with them, and they could depend on anything we said, because all equipment's going to print the same way, but they could depend on the service they were going to get from us. Not only the service, but we catch mistakes, where people are trained to catch mistakes before you run jobs and everything, and they would appreciate those phone calls of calling back and say, this engineering drawing isn't correct, and we would help in that way. And our clients really have depended on us because of our service and our friendship. You know, you buy a Mercedes, it's going to drive the same for every person that drives that damn machine, but what you can't get is the service that we offer, and the friendship that we offer, and the informality that we offer. You know, if I'm there and they come in, they love the abuse I give them. What the hell are you doing here? You know, let me give you the number of our competitor. I don't even bother. What, you really want to give me your competitor? Anybody, just get out of here. You're bothering me, you know. And they love to be messed with. I mess with them all. So that's how I live my life. That's who I am as a person. The boys have been trained to know that never, ever tell people a lie. If people tell you a lie, they got you for life. If you catch them lying, you let them know about it, and you got them for life. Your family name and your business name is everything you have to sell. And if you mess that up, you're messing up everything. They've carried that same philosophy forward, and that has been that. So,
They just need a little break.
you go. Is this? Are we finished with this?
We finished with it.
I'm tired. I'm tired of looking at him.